Hello, Melina Palmer. Welcome to the Chasing Unleashed podcast. I am so thankful and grateful that you're here.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here.
And I'd love for you to comment not only on how we have adapted to change, how our brains do that, but why do we tend to be resistant to other change?
Sure. Yeah. So, my new book, which you mentioned, is What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You: Adapting to Change with the Science of Behavioral Economics. So, it's all about understanding how our brains are wired to kind of rebel against a lot of change when we stop and think about it. But when it suits us and when you can work with the brain, change can actually be quite easy. So within the book, I'm giving insight into how the brain really works and then tips on how you can use that in the way you present information to make it so that people will naturally change along with you. So in that example with the iPhone, the iPhone wasn't the first smartphone out there. Maybe some of your listeners had Blackberries and Palm Pilots back in the day,
Right.
but that was not readily adopted in the way that the iPhone was. And there are different ways that change is presented where we just kind of go along and we love it. It's also, thinking about that $5 chai tea latte that I'm getting at Starbucks. What was I don't necessarily remember when I changed, but it seamlessly sort of happened. And change at work and in communicating with other people can be that way too, if we understand, again, change and how it works. So, just to jump right in, if it's okay, a little bit
Sure.
about the foundations of the brain. So, the first part of the book, and I'll say all of my books, because we assume it's an evergreen episode and
Right.
there are more on the horizon, even though this is book two that came out. But you always start with a little bit about how the brain really works. So, for your listeners, if you think about how many decisions you make in an average day, just so we're taking a minute here, think about that. How many decisions did I make today or yesterday? Maybe we think 25 or 50, or you might go crazy and say it's 5,000.
Right.
But actually, the average person makes 35,000 decisions every single day. And the bulk of that has to be done through subconscious processing because our conscious brain just can't handle all of that. And our subconscious processing is fast, automatic processing in the brain where it's got rules of thumb. It knows what's coming. It's predicting. It's keeping us moving along. It likes to be able to hold on to those reins and make decisions as often as it possibly can. And then every so often, if we don't have a rule, we're not sure how to do this thing, the conscious brain is able to kind of step up and take over that process. So subconscious is relying on status quo and predictability of things that have worked in the past, habits, rules, things that we know. So naturally, a change to that is something your brain is going to kind of rebel against because it's outside of that comfort zone and it wants to hold on to things. So instead of saying that we're needing to completely change everything, we can look for another rule that the brain uses. And I share a lot of them in the book. And when you understand those rules, you can leverage them to kind of sidestep and help make it so you're working with a change path or a rule that the brain is already using to make it so it's naturally easier for people to move forward with whatever it is that you're suggesting, whatever that change is. When it comes to our brains, we are all wired to think that we are better, faster, stronger, smarter than everyone else, that we're less biased, less likely to have difficulty, we're better drivers, all these things, even than the us of 5 minutes ago. That's really how our brains are set up. And so we look at others as we're going to try to convince them that we're right and they're wrong. So one thing where I talked about the brain, the 35,000 decisions every day, there's a lot going on there. A lot of times people like to compare the brain to a computer. And so if you were to do that, to put these numbers another way, to reframe it in a way that may seem be more impactful for you, is the subconscious brain can do about 11 million bits per second that it's able to be processing at any given
Wow.
time. 11 million, a lot, right?
Yes.
The conscious brain can do about 40. The
Big
end. Not even
difference.
40,000, right? Even if it's 400,000, it's still not a really great ratio, right?
Right.
So that piece, we don't get to just say like, for now, I need the extra, I instead of 40 bits, I need 100 right now. So this is really important, right? We're stuck with it. And if we're dwelling on other stuff, we get distracted, then things get relegated to that 11 million bits per second. So we have a confirmation bias that we are looking to validate our own beliefs in the way that we ask questions and when we're going into a meeting, let's say. So if you have an employee who is difficult and is going to be problematic as you're trying to bring up this new change initiative, you say, oh man, Steve is really hard to talk to. And I know that this is going to be difficult. So I'm going to be asking questions that are helping him to see that I'm right. So you're constantly then looking for stuff. Your brain is finding ways to reinforce how Steve is being difficult and how he's not getting on board and he's not a team player. Steve is also coming in saying, man, my boss does not believe in me. Like he or she thinks that they never listen to what I have to say. They don't care about me at all. And they're looking for things, they're focusing on stuff that validates that point. So if you go into any of these discussions looking for how you can win and prove to them that they are wrong, it will always be an uphill battle and be incredibly difficult for you. That is not something that is a good way to be going about change.
To tell you what sticks in my head was something you just said, and I can imagine this in business situations, not only boss to employee, but partnerships in businesses, and partnerships and relationships in life, is this confirmation bias. It
Mhm.
sounds like our brain is saying, hey, I know I'm right. And I know that person acts that way. And I'm literally going to seek out confirmation. And I think what that does is it gives an expectation. Oh, I found it. I found it. Melina said that. It confirms what I'm thinking, and this is how I'm going to act. Tell me, because I was going to ask about emotion in that, and I got to believe that confirmation bias can also spark a range of emotions from from anger to bitterness to memories of, oh, they did that to me before, now it's happening again, and dread and all of that. Can you speak to that?
Of course, yeah. It definitely is a root of self-fulfilling prophecies, to be sure. And when that focusing illusion where we're just looking at the things that are going to validate what we already believe, and again, the types of questions that we ask, there's actually a backfire effect that is part of confirmation bias, and we've all been here, right? So you think that the best way to convince the person of this thing, of why they're I don't get into politics and things on my own show either, but why their
Right.
political beliefs are
Right.
wrong, why what they think about the world being flat or whatever else, right, is wrong. We're going to show
Right.
them or whatever. You have your long list of evidence to show the logic, and you have lots of articles and things that you found by searching how to tell someone they're wrong about this thing, why this is bogus, right? You found articles that supported what you were looking for. You give them all the logical things, and they are more convinced than ever that they are right and that you are crazy, even though you gave them all the scientific proof that could possibly show how right you are. So
Right.
that is the backfire effect, where people tend to double down when their belief is questioned, even when they've been given that evidence to show that they are wrong. They believe it more than ever. And so,
Before you
yeah.
leave, please let everybody know, number one, how to get any of your books, including your upcoming book. And I think you have a special deal for all of those who are listening or watching. Tell them about your podcast and your community. Tell them all about you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of that. And of course, I would be delighted to come back on anytime. So thank you. I have plenty to talk about too. I've got hundreds of episodes of my podcast and just keep creating more and more content. So the podcast is The Brainy Business, and that's the name of my company as well. So if you go to thebrainybusiness.com, you can find links for the podcast, for my books, other articles, learn about speaking, consulting, things like that. And my books are wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, and on and on. And you can find them. The new book is What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You. And on for your audience, they can get that first chapter of the book. So being able to see, is this worth my pre-order? Because the book comes out October 11th here of 2022. And so you can go and see, do I love this as much as I think I'm going to? If they go to thebrainybusiness.com/unleashed, then you can get the free chapter, first chapter of the what your employees need and can't tell you, and also what your customer wants and can't tell you. If you want to check out from that first book, and you can find me on all the socials as The Brainy Biz.
Beautiful. And I have it all in the show notes for everybody. So Melina, I'm going to hold you to it. We're going to have you back. Thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.